Emily wasn't supposed to dive again. The season was over, the permits expiring, and the storms rolling in fast. The Eroica's pumps were barely holding pressure, and the crew wanted to start winterizing the gear. But Emily couldn't shake a feeling. Something about the sonar data from the previous day didn't add up. At 80 feet down, the scan had shown a dense, flat return. Not the scattered pattern of pay dirt, but something uniform. Too clean, too deliberate. When the sonar tech brought it up again, he called it probably bedrock. Emily didn't agree. She looked at the readings twice, then said the words that split her team down the middle. "We're going back out." One last dive, they protested. Pumps were overheating. The dredge frame was warped from the last storm, but Emily had already marked the coordinates. Point Delta, a forgotten grid square at the far edge of their claim. She keyed the navigation system herself and told the deck crew to prep suction lines for a single pass. No one spoke after that. They just suited up. By mid-afternoon, the tide window opened. Emily dropped over the side and vanished into the gray water. The descent was rough. Visibility was almost zero. She steadied her breathing, guided only by the handheld sonar. The trench below came into focus, a long depression stretching west to east. Most of it was fine silt and broken rock. Then the signal changed. The device buzzed sharply, metallic feedback. Emily swept again, a solid return. The shape was too precise to be natural. A rectangular mass, buried under layers of gravel, maybe 10 feet long. She dug her glove into the sand and felt the edge of something smooth, colder than the seafloor around it. She brushed off sediment, and a faint gleam flashed back at her light. She paused. That was no rock. Emily marked the site with a weighted buoy and surfaced, reporting what she'd found in clipped, steady words. The deck crew exchanged uneasy looks. They were expecting black sand, maybe a few ounces of gold left in the trench. Not whatever this was. Still, she gave the order. "Run suction, slow speed, focus on my marker." The pump started pulling, and soon the hose clanked with debris. But instead of pay gravel, the sluice box caught something dense and flat. When they hauled it onto the deck, the crew fell silent. It was a thick metallic plate, roughly carved, the corners rounded by corrosion. Emily leaned in close. Across its surface ran shallow stamps and faded lettering. Not modern, not mining equipment, but official embossing. She scraped away a layer of grime. The gold shimmer underneath wasn't pure yellow. It had the dull tone of alloyed bullion, refined but old. The metal test confirmed it. Nearly 98% purity, the same composition used in mid-20th century minting. Along one edge, faint Latin letters appeared, half erased by time. The crew stared. Latin, on a gold plate buried beneath the gnome's sea floor. Emily didn't answer when someone asked if it could have come from a shipwreck. Instead, she focused on the readings from the dredge detector. Another ping, then another, spaced just feet apart. A pattern was emerging, deliberate, consistent, too precise to be random. She made a decision. "Keep the hose steady," she said. "Strip the layer above it. No widening, no moving the head." The crew complied, each pass of the suction revealing clearer edges beneath the gravel. Slowly, the outline of a massive structure began to appear, wedged deep into the trench floor. The wood had blackened with age, but remained intact, preserved by cold silt and low oxygen. Iron bands clung to its sides like skeletal armor. Whatever lay beneath wasn't driftwood, and it wasn't a modern container. This was built to endure, and it had been waiting undisturbed for decades. Emily had the crane rig repositioned for lift, though the sensors showed the structure heavier than expected. Internal scans from the handheld sonar displayed stacked density inside, each layer perfectly aligned. The pattern screamed one thing: bars, not gold dust, not nuggets. Bars. She didn't celebrate. She just told the crew, Bring it up slow." The winch groaned under the weight as the crate broke free of the seafloor, fragments of silt clouding upward like smoke. Midway up, one corner gave way. The pressure and corrosion split the frame open, and a dull metallic clatter hit the deck. Several fused gold bars, each the size of a brick, spilled from the opening, still clumped by salt and time. The deckhand nearest to them just stared. No one spoke. Emily grabbed one, brushed the silt off, and turned it toward the light. Stamped across the surface, half eroded, read a faint line of text: U.S. Army Transport, 1942. She froze. This wasn't mining gold. This wasn't local. This was government bullion. Wartime issue. She set it down carefully and called for a camera. Every bar had matching serial patterns, uniform in size and mark. She logged them all before power cycling the dredge systems and securing the site. Back inside the cabin, she brought up military archives on her tablet, inputting the serial sequences by hand. Within minutes, a hit appeared, matching numbers tied to a wartime manifest from 1942, a shipment listed under Operation Cinder Vault. It was classified cargo. Federal gold reserves moved north during the war, intended for transfer through Anchorage. But the vessel carrying it, the Aurora's Hope, had vanished without record. No wreck, no debris, just listed missing at sea. The coordinates of its last signal lined up nearly exact with the trench they'd been dredging, Point Delta. That meant Emily wasn't just working an old pay streak. She was sitting directly on top of a wartime transport that had never been found. The implications hit immediately. Lost federal cargo, possible military property, maybe even international involvement if the shipment had been shared reserves. Emily didn't mention any of that aloud. She just told the crew they'd continue at first light. Same spot, same parameters. No one argued. The weight of what lay below was starting to sink in. By dawn, the surface had iced over. They cut through it with heaters and lowered Emily again, this time with a reinforced tether and pressure monitor. The dive went deeper than before, following the edge of the trench. The sonar showed metallic debris scattered across 40 meters of seafloor, an entire debris field. Twisted rods, broken plates, and fragments of hull plating all pointed to a single conclusion: a ship. Emily steadied herself against a ridge and swept her light forward. There, bronze fittings glinted beneath layers of sediment, unmistakably marine grade. Not random scrap, not lost gear. This was structural, intentional, designed. She pushed closer, tracing the curve of a bulkhead, crushed under decades of weight. Inside a cavity where the plating had buckled inward, she saw containers wedged tightly together, sealed beneath collapsed beams. Each container was rectangular, metallic, and intact, far too heavy for natural movement. They were stacked in organized rows, almost untouched, despite the wreck around them. She tapped one with her tool. The hollow ring echoed back through the water. Her pressure gauge spiked. The compartment still held trapped air, sealed since the day it sank. Emily pressed the locator beacon against the hull, locking its frequency, and took a final scan before ascending. The wreck stretched beyond her visibility, curving west along the trench. If the crate they'd recovered earlier had come from here, this was the main hold, the vault itself. A glint of gold caught her light through a fractured beam, confirming that the site held far more than she'd seen so far. When she broke the surface, she only said, "We found the ship." The crew remained silent, the frozen inlet creaking under the wind. This wasn't just lost gold. It was a wartime vault, sealed beneath decades of ice and sediment, and they had only begun to uncover it. By first light, Emily was back at the trench. Overnight, the surface layer had refrozen, but the dredge maintained position. She descended tethered directly to the forward section, carrying hydraulic cutters and reinforced oxygen. Her target was the sealed compartment beneath the fractured beam. the same one that had spiked her pressure readings on the previous dive. Visibility remained near zero as she positioned the cutter against the corroded metal. With the first burst of bubbles, a stream of silt and debris shot upward, signaling that the next layer of the vault was finally giving way. The steel gave way faster than expected. When the seal finally cracked, a stream of fine gold dust erupted outward, swirling through the beam of her torch. The compartment wasn't empty. It was full, stacked, heavy, and untouched since the 1940s. Emily eased herself inside and saw neat rows of rectangular ingots, uniform and glowing faintly under her light. Each bar was stamped in black lettering, Federal Reserve, San Francisco. She lifted one and turned it in her hand. Even through the gloves, the weight told her everything. Pure bullion, refined and stamped before the war shifted production. She logged the coordinates and recorded video for later verification. Her gauge estimated the compartment's contents at over 3,000 pounds. The entire lower chamber was a vault. As she reached deeper, the hull around her groaned. The years had eaten through the structure, and the water pressure from the opened seal was changing balance inside the trench. A vibration rippled through the wall. The deck above creaked sharply, then another section folded inward with a metallic crack. She grabbed her tether line, signaling the surface to haul fast. The collapse chased her upward in a cloud of silt and debris. When she finally broke surface, the crane pulled her onto the deck, both her gloves streaked with gold dust. No one spoke. They just stared at the specks glittering on her suit. The dredge deck was now half covered in gold bars, recovered from the previous lifts, some still fused in clusters, others perfectly clean. Each piece weighed roughly 40 pounds, and the markings were identical across the hull. Tests came next. The onboard spectrometer registered purity above 99%, higher than any gnome claim on record. The alloy included wartime stabilizers, trace elements used to keep gold from oxidizing during long-term sea transport. Whoever packed these bars expected them to survive anything. Emily cataloged the data herself, tagging each sample with corresponding serial patterns. The numbers followed the same sequence from the crate recovered earlier, confirming the bars all came from one unified load. While the main cargo was pure bullion, a smaller sealed box retrieved from inside the compartment held mixed items: rings, insignias, medallions. Inside, velvet-lined cases had deteriorated, leaving the contents scattered but intact. Each item bore dual insignias: the eagle of the United States on one side and the double-headed crest of pre-Soviet Russia on the other. These weren't standard wartime awards. They were symbols of alliance. Gifts, perhaps, from diplomatic exchanges during early cooperation efforts between the nations before relations collapsed. Emily realized then what she had found wasn't only a lost shipment of gold. It was a missing diplomatic consignment, part of an unrecorded gold exchange meant to stabilize international reserves before the end of the war. She documented every detail, knowing the implications could reach far beyond any normal discovery. The storm that night pushed ice into the inlet, but they stayed anchored. At dawn, before she could even prepare the next dive, a message came over the radio, a Coast Guard aircraft inbound requesting coordinates and recovery details. Within hours, a cutter appeared on the horizon, approaching fast. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. No one had filed a report. Someone else had. By the time the vessel docked alongside the Eroica, uniformed officers were already preparing manifests. They boarded with clear authority, citing maritime salvage laws and federal security protocols. The tone left no room for argument. They demanded immediate surrender of the recovered cargo for verification. Emily handed over her logs, but their focus was on the gold. Row after row of ingots stacked across the deck. They sealed each piece in marked containers and photographed the serials, cross-referencing them against something none of the crew could see. A helicopter arrived next, carrying 2 men in plain suits who didn't wear Coast Guard insignia. They spoke briefly to the commanding officer, then directed the team to crate the gold under restricted classification. Within hours, the entire haul, bars, artifacts, even sediment samples, was loaded aboard and removed. When Emily asked for documentation, she was told the case involved national security handling and would be reviewed in Washington. Every member of the Eroica was interviewed separately on deck. They were told to maintain silence pending legal determination of salvage rights and ownership status. Equipment logs were copied, and the dredge's black box data was confiscated. Attempts to contact Nome Harbor for offload permissions were blocked, and the recovery zone around Point Delta was immediately declared restricted. By evening, the cutter departed, carrying every ounce of recovered gold. Only the faint dust on Emily's gloves and the imprints on the deck remained. No official paperwork confirmed the seizure, and maritime records listed nothing. Emily's private note that night was simple. "The vault is still down there." What they took wasn't all of it. Within days, signs of continued activity reached her indirectly. Experienced divers in Nome reported seeing military submersibles returning to the trench at night, navigating the same coordinates Emily had marked. Local fishermen described floodlights cutting across the frozen inlet and engines humming far from any public dock. The rumors spread quickly through the small communities, persistent enough that Emily's former colleague, still working freelance on sonar mapping projects, managed to send her encrypted updates. Even as official channels denied any operation, the evidence suggested the authorities were not finished with Point Delta, and the trench that had yielded $90 million in gold was far from fully explored. Within days, the contact sent her encrypted data files containing sonar scans from the trench. Emily analyzed the grids immediately. Beneath the main wreck, the data revealed multiple anomalies. 3 distinct metallic pockets appeared along a diagonal, buried deeper than the original crate and the collapsed hull she had explored. Each pocket was isolated, encased in sediment, and exhibiting density consistent with gold. One reading stood out, a layered signature matching the exact density of Federal Reserve bullion, suggesting the possibility of intact ingots still in place. The rest resembled structural debris, likely from the ship itself or its cargo containers. Access to the trench was now officially restricted. Notices from the Coast Guard forbade unauthorized vessels from approaching within a mile of the original site. Any further dives would require explicit federal permits, effectively locking the treasure out of civilian hands. Emily knew that without independent verification, even if she managed a legal return, no one would believe what she had discovered. She decided to act quickly with what she could control, samples already retrieved. Emily commissioned a private lab to run detailed analyses on the residue collected from her dredge hoses and sluice boxes. She provided strict instructions: isolate metallic traces and determine elemental composition. Within a week, the report returned. The sediment contained microscopic fragments of gold, chemically identical to mid-20th century Federal Reserve reserves. Not only did this confirm that the recovered crate was authentic, it suggested the dredge had disturbed the surface layer of a much larger deposit. The lab also noted a separate anomaly: minute bronze fragments consistent with ship fittings, possibly hull plates or container reinforcement, embedded in sediment layers beneath the surface. Combining the new data with her previous sonar readings, Emily concluded that less than half the original cargo had been removed before federal authorities intervened. The rest remained buried in deeper pockets under thick layers of silt and ice. The metallic signatures hinted at more intact ingots, still sealed within their original containers, lying untouched beneath the trench floor. She estimated that the potential haul could exceed several thousand pounds if someone had the means to reach it. While she could no longer access the primary site, Emily continued her own mapping efforts. She used historical charts, previous dredge data, and recent sonar files to outline new coordinates along the trench and nearby depressions. The patterns suggested a main hold that fragmented as the ship settled, scattering portions of its cargo across a defined arc. She theorized that the federal seizure only accounted for surface-level recovery. The deeper chambers remained untouched, insulated by ice and decades of sediment. Diver reports trickled in over subsequent weeks. Some claimed that sonar echoes in the trench hinted at hollow chambers, perfectly shaped, unlike natural formations. Others suggested that metallic glints under the ice could be detected with low-frequency scans. These unverified reports kept Emily's focus sharp. Even if she couldn't dive, she could still track the anomalies remotely, creating a precise map for any potential future operation. Each new reading reinforced what she already suspected. The official haul represented just the top layer of what was buried. Emily documented everything meticulously, noting the differences between her recovered material, federal reports, and sonar anomalies. She emphasized correlations between sediment composition, gold purity, and structural remnants from the original vessel. Every layer of silt, every fragment, told part of the story that federal records omitted. The numbers suggested a multi-ton cargo still buried beneath the ice shelf, waiting for the right conditions to be recovered safely. While the Point Delta site was now classified as a hazardous zone, Emily maintained a separate log of surrounding areas under alternate coordinates. These were mapped with the precision of military survey work, longitudinal and latitudinal markers, estimated depth layers, and predicted sediment density. She kept the records private but meticulously updated, understanding that one day the true extent of the wreck and its hidden cargo could be verified. Despite the federal takeover, Emily's records implied something startling. If $90 million had come from the surface layer alone, the remainder, still untouched beneath the trench, could dwarf the initial recovery. Calculations based on sonar density readings, sediment volume, and known cargo distribution suggested there could be several additional multi-ton pockets, each containing pure bullion, intact boxes, and historical artifacts. The site had been partially stripped, but the main treasure remained, buried, protected, and virtually invisible without precise sonar mapping. Emily's final notes reflected both anticipation and caution. She recorded every detail from her dredge recovery, private lab analyses, and new sonar readings. The Point Delta Trench had already given her one of the largest wartime gold hauls ever documented in Nome. But her notes concluded with a single sobering line. If $90 million came from the surface layer, what's still buried below is far greater. Every scan, every residue sample, every anomaly confirmed the truth. Point Delta was far from exhausted, and the deepest secrets of the trench remained hidden beneath layers of ice, sediment, and federal restrictions. Her work ended not with closure, but with possibility. The federal intervention may have taken immediate control, but it could not erase the evidence she had collected. She continued plotting, analyzing, and recording, knowing the site still held untold wealth. Multiple layers of gold, diplomatic artifacts, and intact ship cargo remained locked beneath the ice shelf, waiting for someone with knowledge, technology, and determination to reveal the rest. Every measurement, every anomaly pointed to a single reality. Point Delta was only partially uncovered, and the legacy of the Aurora's hope was far from fully revealed. Emily's logs, encrypted sonar files, and private lab results together formed the most detailed account of the trench ever recorded. It documented not only recovered bullion, but also confirmed that a substantial portion of the World War II shipment remained untouched. In her notes, she projected the scale. Multiple metallic pockets, each potentially hundreds of pounds of gold, with structural remnants still preserving the containers. Each scan suggested a precise layout, like a buried vault, echoing the original ship hold. The implication was clear. While $90 million had been lifted to the surface, the hidden majority could surpass it by multiples. A treasure still lying undisturbed beneath layers of ice and sediment. Emily closed her final entry with a precise map reference marking 3 unverified but probable gold pockets, reinforcing the message that Point Delta was far from depleted. The trench, frozen and restricted, held more than the initial recovery suggested. Her records, private yet comprehensive, proved that even with federal control, the main chambers of the wreck remained intact, carrying a story and a wealth that had been hidden for over 8 decades.